Aspects of self, the voice of anger. To find power in vows, we can use shadow work. If we ignore the shadow, it creeps up on us. So we give the shadow the power to speak and be heard. Think about validating these voices instead of pretending they don't exist and shutting them down. They do exist. The shadow of anger is part of the survival mechanism of our DNA. The sense of kill or be killed goes back through trillions of incarnations, back to the beginningless beginning. The voice is old. It knows a few tricks. It's best to respect that. Don't think you can outsmart it with a vow. We need to collaborate with this aspect of ourselves. Does that mean we're making a deal with the devil? No more than any other time when we give in to the deepest drives in our minds. We're all yin and yang, Shiva and Shakti, Yab and Yum, dualistic, of two minds. In fact, it's not quite that simple. It's my view that we're made up of many minds. The good news is that we can use this practice to achieve a little balance. Sit in quiet meditation in the way that has been described earlier, or another way that you find useful. From this point, consider the voice of anger. What does it want? How does it see the world? What are its healthier parts? Can you find them? What does it want to tear apart? In the first person, as the voice of anger, speak your truth to the following questions. Please don't act out on any of the feelings that emerge. The author assumes no responsibility, stated or implied, to any actions that anyone performs. Perhaps it's best to do these with a therapist or a sponsor. It's not a good idea to do them if you're high or have serious mental disturbances. Just do your best to get a little insight into yourself or one of the aspects thereof. Think about the voice of anger. It wants to tear things up. It has no conscience. It's primal but not primordial. It feels basic sensations like hot and cold, dark and light, high and low. Though it has been known to collaborate with intelligence, it doesn't really think as much as it acts on the basis of survival. So we'll begin. I will ask the question and then you actually answer it. Who are you? And here's where you would say out loud, I am the voice of anger. So, who are you? You can pause the recording and answer some of these, or you can write these down, you can come back to it later, or you can read it in the book. It's from The Power of Vow on Amazon. So who are you? What are some other names that you might be known by or associated with? What are some of the other names that you might be known by? How do you see the world? As the voice of anger, what is your vow? What is your vow? Where are you in the world? Where do you live? Where do you reside within the body of the self? What is your job? How do you help the self? What happens when you go too far? What do you need the self to know about you? That's a really important one in the shadow work. What are your feelings about the vow not to act out with anger or cause harm? Thank you for speaking. Please know that you're acknowledged. Please let your energy be a part of the whole without causing harm. So, the idea of this is related to the vow. I'll go back here in my book. I was reading from my book, The Power of Vow. I vow not to harm. So we're talking about the 5 precepts or the lay vows in Buddhism. And just in response to everything that came out with the Noah Levine Against the Stream, all that stuff, my last podcast, episode 33, how to find a real teacher, I thought it would be important for us Buddhists, those of us who are interested in being Buddhists, and so forth. To look over the vows, look over the precepts, and consider those again, maybe in a new light, maybe for the first time. So I'm going to do one at a time. So this will be 5 episodes. And I'm going to try to interview a couple of people on some of these. Well, for the first one, I just wanted to read this out of The Power of Vow, because what I did after podcast episode 33 is I took that podcast and transcribed it and then rewrote it all and edited it and added some things and clarified some things and cleaned up the language. And I said fuck a lot in that one. I was in my car. It was hot. I was kind of trying to get it out there. But, you know, I took the time to really reconsider a lot of it and what I was saying and how I was saying it. So I put that out in a book. It is called How to Find a Spiritual Teacher. It's on Amazon. So if you Google Darren Littlejohn, or if you go to Amazon.com and type in How to Find a Spiritual Teacher, it's a beige cover and you'll see my name on it. It's under my author profile. I'm going to make a bit.ly link for that, but I don't have it yet. So I'll put that out. If you're not on my email list, go to the 12stepbuddhist.com and just put your email in there and you'll get announcements. I also have I put these 2 books out on the same day, The Yoga of Letting Go and How to Find a Spiritual Teacher. So they're both actually pretty substantial amount of content. They are shorter ebooks, but they're both pretty thick. There's a lot of material in there. So I do need to send out advanced reader copies for reviews. I'm going to make a page for that. If you're interested in that and you're willing to write a review for me up on Amazon, just email me right away, darrenblittlejohn@gmail.com, and I'll send it straight to you in PDF format. If you want the EPUB or the MOBI, you have to buy it. But these books are all really low priced. The Yoga of Letting Go is $5.99. It's several thousand words longer than the Yoga of Self-Compassion, part of the Yoga of Transformation series. And this one is, I think, $4.99, the How to Find a Spiritual Teacher. So covers a lot of good ground in there, and it's really, really relevant right now. So grab it, share it, like it, tell people about it, review it for me. Anyway, so these vows. You know, I've written about this extensively in other places, so I won't go into a lot of background on it, but I've taken my vows. I took my vows a lot. I took my vows a lot of times, We had them in a different way in the Joko Beck Zen practice. We had a different way of saying them. She had kind of rewritten them, reformulated them, and so forth. So those are cool. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. But I don't really necessarily agree with her on rewriting the actual vows. I do love those. I do love the way she wrote them, and I have those out there. But I do feel like these, when I did these with Venerable Robina, the Tibetan, and I've done them a number of times. I've done the vows with different Tibetan masters and taken refuge with the Dalai Lama, the Bodhisattva vow, and so forth. So I wrote all about this extensively in this book, so you can look into it deeply. I'm going to retitle that book, by the way, and redo the cover and just kind of rethink a little bit of the way I presented it. But that's going to be a little bit because I've got a bunch of other projects I'm working on. But this one is really related to ahimsa, nonviolence. So I wrote in the Yoga of Self-Compassion, which was the first of the series of 3 for the Yoga of Transformation series. I wrote about ahimsa and what are called the yamas and niyamas, which are the observances and restraints of yoga, written by the ancient sage Patanjali, which may or may not have been one person. We don't know. But when you read Patanjali, it's like reading Longchenpa or reading Rumi or being in the space of Buddha. And these words and these teachings are very clear and very profound and change everything. So I vow not to harm. what do we mean by that? And what do we do? How do we do it? So a vow is a promise. It's a commitment. So when we make the vow, we set ourselves up for negative karma if we're not going to follow it. So we want to make sure to purify, because we're going to break our vows like every day. Purification is not really talked about so much in the sutra, in the lower schools, in the sutra schools. It is there. It is part of the practice. It can be said that we can meditate on the space of emptiness and compassion, and that's purifying. That's true. There are more tantric ways of performing purifications. We can make offerings. There's a lot to go into in that. But in general, we make a vow. Now, we can make a vow for 5 minutes. I vow not to harm for the next 5 minutes, or for the day, or one day at a time. Now, anybody who's sober, who remembers trying to get clean, and maybe we got to do it 1 minute at a time sometimes, right? We can do that with vows. And it's important, to practice self-compassion with this and not hold this big stick over our heads. Well, I'm going to be a Buddhist no matter what, And again, it's also important to not let ourselves get away with the BS of the addict mind. And that's one thing I really enjoyed working with the aspects of self-dialogues over the years, is just really getting a voice to understand the position, the archetype, the energy of the different voices, like the addict. And the addict is a real strong one, and the addict has a lot of different parts to it. So giving voice to the shadow is important, but giving voice to the strength, to the intention, to the power, to ahimsa, non-harming. So I've written this in 2 different books, so you can read more, and there's a lot of places to find this kind of content. But from my point of view, it's important to understand that the vow is to be taken seriously, but that we also need to refresh it. We might need to just meditate on being in the vow. Maybe it's 1 day at a time. I vow not to harm. And then when you vow, if you've got a 12-step program that you can follow, if you break the vow, which you're going to do, you can do your 10-step daily inventory. And you can talk about it with a sponsor or spiritual advisor. I wrote in the Yoga of Letting Go, I'm calling it the Spiritual Management Team, which in the 12-step Buddhist, I think I had a different name for it. I just called it Management Team. It's really, really good to have a team of people to deal with in spiritual practice. This whole topic of should you have a teacher, do you need a teacher, what happens when your teacher acts badly, what happens when some people think they did and some people think they didn't. I talked a lot about this in how to find a spiritual teacher, which you'll know a lot of it if you listen to the podcast. But this whole idea of the Stockholm Syndrome, and maybe you may or may not be that traumatized, but there is a bit of that principle at play when we start to make excuses. I did it in my super toxic relationship. I made excuses for the bad behavior. I said, no, I'm a bodhisattva. I'm on the path. I'm going to love her no matter how many pictures of her with other men she sends me. You know what I mean? No matter how many times I see her without her wedding ring on, or etc. Blah, blah. Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bonding. Look into it. I'm going to be writing and talking a lot more about this as we go. But in terms of being alone in the spiritual path, it's not a good idea. If you're a cave-dwelling yogi and you're able to be at that level and achieve mastery on your own, great. I don't know anybody like that. I don't know anybody that strong. Personally, my AA sponsor, John C., always told me, never go spiritual matters alone. That means you need somebody. That means you need, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, a teacher, teaching, a community, all right? And if you're a refuge recovery person, you know what that means. If you're not, if you're a 12-step person, you can make it be your home group, a few people on your team. You can ask people. You can make your own little Sangha. You can have a team of maybe you, your therapist, and your other advisor, another friend. But it's healthier to have it be kind of outside the circle a little bit. So your spouse probably isn't your best confidant in that stuff, and just the therapist is the clinical, relationship which you're paying for and limited on your interactions. So it's best to have a kind of an organic, grassroots, community-based kind of Sangha. So enough on that. But what I mean by doing this is that you need, when you vow not to harm, you need to be able to share it with others. Now, I shared everything on Facebook for years. Not everybody's willing to do that or comfortable doing it. So obviously there's social media, there's forums, there are ways that you can chat with people on Instagram. If you want to chat me, send me. Instagram is 12-Step Buddhist. You can send me a note or an email or whatever. If I have time, I'm going to talk to you. Sometimes I'll have to talk to people by phone because it's too hard to text it all out, but I don't mind. So find yourself some kind of, at least small group. So when you're practicing, when you're taking the vow, why do you want to take the vow? That's a whole other topic. The reason why you want to take the vow is so that you can create good karma and create a good situation and have a stable mind. And as Patanjali said, pacify these subtle obscurations of the mind, the subtle fluctuations of the mind. So really we want to clear our mind for meditation. That's why we take vows. That's why we do yoga. That's why we practice breathing. That's why we stop getting drunk and stoned. That's why, in my case, I had to stop getting, jacked up on the hyper-arousal of a toxic relationship. Another way to slip down the funnel. Remind me, I've got to write this down. The ebook for the funnel. That was a really big, important topic. But I'm also gonna write more about that in the 12-Step Buddhist 10-year anniversary edition, which I'm going to work on here pretty soon. But I don't think I want to do a separate ebook on the funnel, because it's easy to fall into the funnel when you're in sobriety for a number of years and you fall down these pathways like sexual misconduct, like acting out of anger, like depression, these kinds of things, So it is important to keep in mind that the spiritual life is not a theory. It has to be lived. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of support. Do you know what I mean? So get yourself that support. Practice the self-compassion by getting yourself that support. And if you're one of these people email me, and this is the biggest question I've ever gotten, is, well, I'm in BFE and I don't have a spiritual group. Well, come on. If you can find somebody to talk to. You can find another person to sit and meditate with 30 minutes. When I first started working with the Zen community in Long Beach, when I went to Cal State Long Beach, back then we used the thing called the Yellow Pages. I just looked up Buddhist group or something, and I found this guy and his wife, and they, we came down to San Diego occasionally to go to the center, but I went over, and this guy Bill, he was sober, and his wife Ellen, I think, and ring the bell, light the incense, set the timer, bow when you're done. You can find people. You can do online sanghas. You can create one for yourself. You can move somewhere else if you really want to be with one. You can go on a retreat. Just go on a retreat. There are retreats everywhere. I mean, it's so easy to find a retreat. And it's kind of a cool thing to do, just to get out and do a day or two or a week or something like that. Do a Vipassana, do a Thich Nhat Hanh retreat, something, there's a lot of options. So you can find your Sangha, but vowing not to harm, what does that mean? Don't harm. It means don't cause suffering. It means don't intentionally hurt someone. It means if you hurt someone, stop. If you hurt beings, stop. Well, you can get really deep into a lot of detail on what it means to hurt other beings. Does it mean I have to be a vegetarian? It depends on your view. In Buddhism, we have different views. We adopt a view that's useful to the experience we're having, right? We adopt a view that's useful to the experience we're having. That doesn't mean that we use the view to justify bad behavior, right? That's a really tricky point in Tantra. And Geshe Sawang talks about that in a YouTube. The two Kempo brothers, the one Palden Rinpoche passed away a bunch of years ago, but I have had initiations with them and I know them, and they're amazing. You can follow, you can find these people on YouTube. But do I have to be a vegetarian? I'm not going to answer that question for you, because some vegetarians are, to vegans, you're like evil if you're not a vegan, But even if you look at being a vegan, any food that is produced kills beings. Does that mean it's okay? I mean, I love animals. I don't want to eat meat. I really want to be a vegetarian. I just really honestly don't know how. I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need some help with that. And at some point, I will be vegetarian. I may even be vegan. But I'm willing to consider every time I pick up that piece of meat to eat that this being gave its life, this being suffered. And I will open my energy to make a connection with that being. You know, I went to a sweat lodge once, like really long, like maybe 15 years ago, a Native American Lakota sweat lodge in the Portland area at Celilo, sort of like a sacred river fishing area. And it was like an AA thing, but it was kind of weird. But they, you know, we had salmon, and before we dove in to eat the salmon, they said, you have to bless that animal. You have to be grateful to that animal to free it. So we can have a different attitude. At least we can have a different attitude towards what we do now. Do we kill bugs? No. Don't kill the bug. I mean, if you got to kill, like if your dog has fleas, some people would say, if you want to be super Puritan about it, some people would say, well, don't kill the, you know, but look, I will kill the bugs if I have to. I don't do it. I can't tell you the last time I've killed a bug. It may have been years, but, you know, my dog's not going to suffer. I'm going to put the flea meds on. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you take probiotics, I mean, if you're digesting, you're killing things. So keep it in mind before you're too Puritan about things. But do so with consciousness. Do so with compassion. Do so with an open heart. Understand that you're making a commitment to the beings that you are involved with. You have a relationship. Imagine that you are a perfectly completed Buddha, and all beings that you have ever touched, thought about, harmed, helped throughout beginningless lifetimes are connected to you karmically. You are a fully completed Buddha, and all of those beings are connected to you. Now you have the opportunity to lead those beings to enlightenment, total liberation from suffering, for the benefit of all beings. Think about it. These are ways of thinking about things. Don't be too puritanical. But don't let yourself slide either. You know, there's a balance. It's like our yoga practice. There's a balance between effort and ease. Balance between effort and ease. All right, so that's a little bit on the vow not to harm, a little bit on vows in general. There's more to talk about with it, but I'm trying to keep the podcasts down to 20 minutes or so. Please go to Amazon and grab the Yoga of Self-Compassion. Give it a review. It's $2.99. Grab the Yoga of Letting Go. I have 0 reviews yet. It just was released yesterday, and I did not do an advanced reader email blast on it. So there were pre-orders, but that one needs some reviews. And how to find a spiritual teacher. Really important. If you're suffering from all this stuff that's gone on with the Dharma punks and all the various other, well, there are many others. Sakyong Mifam in the Shambhala tradition, huge. And I talk about a bunch of these, but huge, huge impact that these teachers make with their bad behavior, you know. So read it and be aware of it. Have the conversation. Have the Sangha. Think about these things. And I'm happy to help if I can help you. What else can I tell you? That's about it. Like and share, like and share. Find me on Instagram. And let me know if there's anything you need. Content that you want, questions that you have. You can always reach me, DarrenBLittlejohn@gmail.com. This is episode 34, the 5 Lay Vows I Vow Not to Harm. Signing out. Enjoy the day.